Ivy Reeves had exactly 3 seconds to register that she was not, in fact, dreaming about sleeping on a cloud before reality crashed down like a wrecking ball. Egyptian cotton. The sheets beneath her were Egyptian cotton, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent at the Roach Motel she called home. Her daughter Poppy sat beside her on the massive bed, cheerfully gnawing on what appeared to be a solid gold pen like it was the world's most expensive teething ring. And standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of what was definitely not the supply closet where she'd meant to catch a quick 20-minute nap, was the most terrifyingly beautiful man she'd ever seen. He looked like he was deciding between calling the police or eating them both alive. "Oh, shit," Ivy whispered, then immediately clapped her hand over her mouth. Shoot. Hi." The man, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of sharp jawline that could cut glass and eyes like winter storms, remained perfectly still. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, and he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Fury? Fascination? Indigestion? Poppy, blissfully unaware that they were probably about to become homeless and possibly imprisoned, babbled happily and waved the gold pen like a tiny scepter. "You're in my bed," the man said, his voice low and controlled. It was the kind of voice that made boardrooms fall silent and probably made grown men weep. "I can explain," Ivy said, scrambling to sit up while trying to keep Poppy from launching herself off the bed. "Well, actually, I can't really explain it in a way that makes me sound less insane, but I can try." One perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched upward. "I'm listening." Ivy's brain, already operating on 30 hours without sleep and fueled by nothing but vending machine coffee and pure desperation, went into overdrive. "Okay, so you know how sometimes when you're really, really tired, and you've been cleaning toilets for 6 hours straight, and your baby has been screaming for approximately 7 years. She's 9 months old," Ivy corrected herself quickly. "But it feels like 7 years. Anyway, sometimes you duck into what you think is a supply closet for just a tiny nap, and it turns out to be this." She gestured helplessly at the penthouse suite around them. The man stepped further into the room, and Ivy caught a scent that made something deep in her chest flutter. Pine and storm clouds and something wild that made her omega instincts sit up and take notice. Alpha. Definitely alpha. And not just any alpha. This was the kind that made other alphas nervous. "You thought my penthouse was a supply closet," he said flatly. "In my defense, I was very tired. And this building has a confusing layout. And Poppy was crying, and I just needed 5 minutes where she wasn't screaming, and this bed looked so." Ivy's rambling was cut short by a series of electronic beeps. The room's lights suddenly dimmed to a soft amber, classical music began playing from hidden speakers, and a smooth automated voice announced, "Good evening, Mr. Ashford. Welcome home. Your organic baby food delivery, 47 pounds, will arrive within the hour." Ivy and the man, Mr. Ashford apparently, stared at each other in stunned silence. "Did your baby just order 47 pounds of organic baby food?" he asked. Ivy looked down at Poppy, who was now somehow holding what appeared to be a tablet computer in addition to the gold pen. The screen showed a shopping cart full of pureed vegetables and fruits. "Poppy, no," Ivy said weakly. "Bad baby. We don't order things on other people's tablets." Poppy giggled and slapped the screen, adding what looked like a case of imported formula to the cart. "How did she?" Mr. Ashford started. "I have no idea. She's like a tiny technology wizard. Last week she somehow ordered pizza to our apartment using the neighbor's smart TV." Ivy gently extracted the tablet from Poppy's grasp, which immediately made the baby's face scrunch up in preparation for a world-class tantrum. "Oh no, please don't. Wah wah wah." Poppy's scream could have shattered windows. In the confines of the penthouse, it was absolutely devastating. Mr. Ashford winced and took a step back. "Does she always?" "Indoor voices." Ivy shouted over the wailing, bouncing Poppy in her arms. "We use indoor voices around babies. The yelling makes them worse." For a moment, the most powerful alpha in the city looked genuinely chastened. "I wasn't yelling. Your whole existence is yelling." Ivy shot back, still bouncing. "You're like a walking exclamation point in an expensive suit." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or amusement. "A walking exclamation point? Look, mister." She paused, realizing she still didn't actually know his name, despite the smart house calling him Mr. Ashford. "Dante," he said quietly. "Dante Ashford." Ivy's bouncing slowed as the name registered. "Dante Ashford. As in Ashford Industries. As in the billionaire alpha who owned half the city, including the Crescent Tower Hotel where she worked. As in her boss's 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 boss. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, I am so fired." "Probably," he agreed, but there was something almost gentle in his voice now. Poppy's crying had subsided to sniffles, and she was studying Dante with the intense focus she usually reserved for trying to eat her own feet. Suddenly, she reached out toward him with both arms, making her pick-me-up noise. "She wants you to hold her," Ivy said, surprised. Dante looked at the baby like she was a particularly complex mathematical equation. "I don't hold babies. She's not going to break. And she likes you, which is weird because she usually hates everyone except me. And sometimes she hates me too. I don't." "Oh, for crying out loud." Ivy stepped forward and, before Dante could protest, placed Poppy in his arms. "Support her head, don't drop her, try not to look like you're afraid she's going to explode." Dante held Poppy awkwardly, like she was made of spun glass and nitroglycerin. Poppy, delighted by this new development, immediately grabbed his tie and tried to stuff it in her mouth. "She's teething," Ivy explained. "Everything goes in the mouth, including, apparently, solid gold pens." She held up the pen Poppy had been gnawing on earlier. "This is yours, I assume?" "It was a gift from the Japanese Prime Minister," Dante said absently, still staring down at Poppy with a bewildered expression. "Well, it's been thoroughly slobbered on now. Consider it blessed by baby drool." The tablet chimed again. "Your organic baby food order has been confirmed," the house announced cheerfully. "Total $4,732. Ivy's knees nearly buckled. $4,000? Oh God, I'll pay you back. I'll work extra shifts, I'll sell plasma, I'll... "Stop," Dante said firmly. "It's fine. It's not fine. That's more money than I make in 2 months. Then you're not being paid enough." Ivy stared at him. Here she was, having broken into his home, slept in his bed, let her baby destroy his expensive belongings and accidentally order enough baby food to feed a small army, and he was worried about her salary? "You're not what I expected," she said honestly. "What did you expect? Fire and brimstone. Maybe some casual murder. You have a reputation, you know." Dante's mouth quirked upward in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "I don't casually murder people who break into my home and insult my existence." "Just the ones who do it formally?" "Exactly." Poppy had managed to work Dante's tie completely into her mouth and was now making contented sucking noises. Dante looked down at her with an expression of absolute bewilderment. "She's drooling on Armani silk," he said wonderingly. "She drools on everything. It's like her superpower." Ivy reached out to take Poppy back, but the baby clung to Dante's shirt and made a noise of protest. "Well, that's new. She usually only does that with me. She's very..." Dante paused, searching for words. "Small. That's generally how babies work, yes. And loud. Also standard baby features. But she's not crying anymore." Ivy looked at her daughter, who was indeed calm and content in the arms of the most dangerous alpha in the city. "No, she's not. Which is honestly kind of miraculous. She's been fussy all week." The penthouse fell into an oddly comfortable silence, broken only by Poppy's happy babbling and the soft classical music still playing in the background. Ivy found herself really looking at Dante for the first time, not just seeing him as an obstacle or threat, but as a person. There were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and tension in his shoulders that suggested the weight of the world resting there. "When did you last sleep?" she asked without thinking. Dante looked up from Poppy, surprised. "What? Sleep? When did you last get actual sleep? Not just a few hours on a plane or catnaps between meetings." He frowned, as if the question genuinely puzzled him. "I don't remember." "Right. That's what I thought." Ivy settled onto the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling the full weight of her own exhaustion. "We're a pair, aren't we? The Walking Dead. You from too much work, me from too little sleep." "I should call security," Dante said, but he made no move to do so. "You should," Ivy agreed. "I broke into your home. That's definitely a crime. Several crimes, technically. And yet here we are, having a civilized conversation while my daughter uses your designer tie as a chew toy." Dante looked down at Poppy again, and this time Ivy caught something in his expression. A softness, a wonder, like he was seeing something he'd never encountered before. "She's not afraid of me," he said quietly. "Should she be? Most people are." Ivy studied his face, seeing past the sharp angles and intimidating presence to something else underneath. "You're not as scary as you think you are. Powerful, yes. Intimidating, absolutely. But scary? No. You don't know me." I know you haven't called security yet, even though I'm clearly trespassing. I know you're holding my baby like she's made of precious metal, even though she's drooling all over your expensive clothes. And I know you're standing there looking like you've never seen anything as fascinating as a 9-month-old Omega baby. Dante's eyes snapped to hers. Omega. Did I not mention that? Yeah, Poppy's an Omega. Takes after her mom. Ivy tried to keep her voice light, but she knew what that information meant. Omega babies were rare, precious, and in a world where alphas like Dante ruled from the top of glass towers, incredibly vulnerable. Something shifted in Dante's expression, a protectiveness that made Ivy's chest tighten with an emotion she didn't want to name. Where's her father? He asked, and there was an edge to his voice now. Not in the picture, Ivy said firmly. And it's going to stay that way. Before Dante could respond, the house chimed again. Sir, your organic baby food delivery has arrived. Shall I have it brought up? Dante looked at Ivy, then at Poppy, who was still contentedly destroying his tie. Yes, he said finally. Bring it up. You don't have to, Ivy started. I know I don't have to. I want to. And as crazy as it sounded, as impossible as it seemed, Ivy found herself believing him. Chapter 2. 24 hours later, Ivy stood in the marble-floored foyer of Dante's penthouse, holding a diaper bag in one hand and her rapidly dissolving sanity in the other. 47 pounds of organic baby food formed a small mountain beside the elevator, and Poppy was systematically trying to eat the buttons on Dante's shirt while he held her with the careful concentration of someone defusing a bomb. Let me see if I understand this correctly, Ivy said slowly. You want to hire me as your... What did you call it? Domestic crisis manager, Dante replied, his voice carrying that same controlled tone she was beginning to recognize as his default setting when he was trying not to reveal how completely out of his depth he was. Which is a fancy way of saying nanny. It's a more comprehensive position than traditional childcare. Nanny, Ivy repeated firmly. You want to hire me as a live-in nanny for your nephew, who I haven't even met yet, despite the fact that yesterday you found me trespassing in your bed. When you put it like that, it does sound questionable. It sounds insane, which, given my current financial situation, means I should probably say yes immediately. Ivy shifted Poppy's diaper bag to her other hand. How old is this nephew of yours? Tyler is 12. 12. Ivy's eyebrows shot up. 12-year-olds don't need nannies. They need babysitters. Sometimes. For like 3 hours max. Something flickered across Dante's face. An expression that looked suspiciously like panic. Tyler is unique. Unique how? He's been through 7 caregivers in the past 6 months. Ivy felt her stomach drop. 7. Mrs. Henderson lasted 3 days before she quit via text message from her car in the parking garage. Miss Rodriguez made it almost a week, but she left a note saying she was reconsidering her career choices and moving to Tibet to become a monk. And the others? Dr. Peterson, who has a PhD in child psychology, left after 2 days muttering something about early-onset sociopathy and demanding combat pay. Ivy stared at him. What exactly did this kid do to drive away a child psychologist? Before Dante could answer, the elevator chimed, and the doors slid open to reveal what could only be described as a miniature version of Dante himself. If Dante had been dipped in chaos and raised by wolves. The boy had the same dark hair, the same sharp features, and the same winter storm eyes. But where Dante radiated controlled power, this kid radiated pure, undiluted mischief. Tyler Ashford stepped into the penthouse wearing a school uniform that looked like it had been through a blender, carrying a backpack that was making suspicious ticking noises. Uncle Dante, he called cheerfully. I'm home. And before you ask, the fire alarm thing wasn't my fault. Technically. I mean, I didn't know that mixing those particular chemicals would. He stopped mid-sentence as his gaze landed on Ivy, and she watched his expression shift from innocent enthusiasm to calculating interest. It was like watching a shark decide whether something was food or entertainment. Who's this? Tyler asked, his voice taking on a tone that was entirely too mature for a 12-year-old. Tyler, this is Miss Reeves. She's going to be staying with us for a while to help manage things. Tyler's smile was all teeth. Another nanny? Uncle Dante, you shouldn't have. I was just starting to get bored. Ivy felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the penthouse's air conditioning. She'd worked with difficult kids before, colicky babies, tantrum-throwing toddlers, even a few genuinely challenging teenagers. But Tyler was looking at her like she was a puzzle he was already planning to take apart. I'm not a nanny, she said firmly, meeting his gaze head-on. I'm a domestic crisis manager. Tyler's eyes lit up with genuine delight. Oh, this is going to be fun. Poppy, apparently sensing the tension in the room, chose that moment to spit up directly onto Dante's tie. The same Armani silk tie she'd been chewing the day before. Well, Ivy said brightly, this is off to a great start. 3 hours later, Ivy was beginning to understand why Dr. Peterson had fled to Tibet. Tyler had helped her unpack by reorganizing her belongings according to some system that appeared to involve hiding her underwear in increasingly creative locations throughout the penthouse. He'd offered to show Poppy his chemistry set, which turned out to be a collection of household cleaning products that could probably strip paint. And he'd somehow managed to reprogram the smart house to play death metal every time someone said the word, please. Dante had retreated to his office after the third time his business call was interrupted by screaming guitars, leaving Ivy to deal with Tyler alone. You know, Tyler said conversationally as he watched Ivy try to fish her bra out of the penthouse's ridiculous modernist sculpture. Miss Rodriguez cried on the second day. I'm not Miss Rodriguez, Ivy replied, finally extracting the bra without destroying the art piece. Dr. Peterson threw a book at me on his last day. A psychology textbook. The irony was delicious. I'm not Dr. Peterson either. Mrs. Henderson locked herself in the bathroom and called the police. They thought she was having a breakdown. Ivy turned to face him fully, holding her rescued underwear. Let me guess, you're trying to figure out which buttons to push to make me quit. Tyler's smile was sharp and entirely too knowing. I'm just making conversation. Right. Well, here's some conversation for you. I've been cleaning up other people's messes since I was younger than you are now. I've dealt with drunk businessmen who think the hallway is their personal bathroom, entitled socialites who leave their hotel rooms looking like crime scenes, and more screaming, crying, demanding humans than you can imagine. A 12-year-old with a chemistry set and an attitude doesn't even register on my scale of difficult. Something shifted in Tyler's expression, surprise maybe, or grudging respect. We'll see, he said simply. That evening, after Tyler had finally been convinced to eat something that wouldn't dissolve his stomach lining and Poppy had been fed, bathed, and wrestled into pajamas, Ivy found herself alone in the penthouse's kitchen. The space was a monument to expensive appliances that probably saw less use than museum pieces, all gleaming steel and black granite that could double as a mirror. She was heating a bottle for Poppy when Dante appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd been through a war. How was your first day as a domestic crisis manager? He asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in his voice. Your nephew is. Ivy paused, searching for diplomatic words. Challenging. That's a generous assessment. He's also brilliant, lonely, and testing boundaries like his life depends on it. Ivy tested the formula temperature on her wrist. Classic behavior for a kid who's been shuffled around and doesn't know where he stands. Dante stepped into the kitchen, and Ivy caught that scent again, pine and storm clouds and something wild that made her omega instincts pay attention. His parents died in a car accident 8 months ago, Dante said quietly. I'm his only family. Ivy's heart clenched. Oh, that explains a lot. I don't know how to. Dante ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. I'm not good with children. I don't understand them. And Tyler? He trailed off, looking more lost than any billionaire alpha had a right to. Tyler what? He brings out something in me. Something I can't control. When he's in danger, or when I think he might be hurt, Dante's hands clenched into fists. I nearly lost control yesterday when he fell off his bike. For a moment I thought the wolf thought. He stopped abruptly, but Ivy understood. The protective instincts that made alphas so formidable also made them volatile when it came to those they considered pack. A grieving, acting-out kid would trigger every protective response Dante had. He knows, doesn't he? Ivy asked. About what you are. Dante nodded grimly. He thinks it's hilarious. He'll deliberately put himself in situations where I have to choose between letting him get hurt or risking a shift. Smart kid. Terrible survival instincts, but smart. I can't keep going through caregivers. He needs stability, consistency. But I can't. You can't handle him alone, Ivy finished. That's why you offered me this job. Yes. Ivy looked at this powerful, dangerous man who was admitting his vulnerabilities to someone he'd known for less than 48 hours. It should have been a red flag. It should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself saying, I'll stay. The relief that crossed Dante's face was so profound it was almost physical. Thank you, he said, and the words held more weight than a simple expression of gratitude. The next morning, Ivy woke to the sound of Poppy babbling happily in her crib and the distant strains of what sounded like the 1812 overture being played at concert volume. She grabbed her robe and padded out to the main living area to find Tyler sitting at the breakfast bar, calmly eating cereal while the penthouse's sound system blasted Tchaikovsky. "Morning," he called cheerfully over the music. "I thought you might like to wake up to something classical." "How thoughtful," Ivy replied, raising her voice to be heard. "Turn it down, please." The death metal kicked in immediately, rattling the windows. "Sorry," Tyler shouted with obviously fake innocence. "I said please." Ivy sighed and went to find the manual controls for the sound system. It took her 10 minutes to locate them, hidden behind a panel that looked like part of the wall, and another 5 to figure out how to override Tyler's programming. When blessed silence finally descended on the penthouse, Tyler was grinning at her with genuine appreciation. "Not bad," he said. "Mrs. Henderson never figured out the override." "I used to work in hotels," Ivy replied, settling Poppy in her high chair. "You learn to navigate complicated systems. What about the chemistry set incident?" "What chemistry set incident?" Tyler's grin widened. "The one that's going to happen after breakfast." Ivy was saved from having to respond by Dante emerging from his office, already dressed in another immaculate suit and carrying a tablet. "I have a conference call with Tokyo in 10 minutes, he announced. "It's important. The Yamamoto deal could make or break the quarter. I'll be in my office." "Try not to." He was interrupted by Poppy, who had somehow managed to escape her high chair, strip off her diaper and pajamas, and was now crawling at impressive speed toward Dante's office, her tiny hands covered in what appeared to be finger paint. "Poppy, no." Ivy lunged after her daughter, but the baby was surprisingly fast for someone whose legs were approximately 3 inches long. Dante, showing reflexes that seemed almost supernatural, scooped Poppy up before she could reach his office door. Unfortunately, this meant that his pristine white shirt was now decorated with rainbow handprints. "Where did she get finger paint?" he asked, holding the naked, giggling baby at arm's length. "I have no idea," Ivy said, then turned to glare at Tyler, who was studying his cereal with intense concentration. "Tyler, I thought she might enjoy some creative expression," Tyler said innocently. "She's 9 months old. Never too early to start developing fine motor skills." Dante's tablet chimed. "Mr. Ashford, the Tokyo call is beginning," the house announced helpfully. "Take the call," Ivy said, reaching for Poppy. "I'll clean her up." "I can't take a call covered in finger paint." "Then change your shirt." "I don't have time to." Poppy chose that moment to grab a fistful of Dante's hair and babble something that sounded remarkably like dada. Dante froze. Tyler's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth, and Ivy felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "Did she just?" Dante started. "She says a lot of things," Ivy said quickly, finally managing to extract Poppy from his arms. "Most of it's nonsense. Babies babble. It doesn't mean anything." But even as she said it, she could see the way Dante was looking at Poppy, like she'd just performed a miracle. His tablet chimed again, more insistently. "Go," Ivy said firmly. "Take your call. I'll handle this." Dante nodded and disappeared into his office, but not before Ivy caught the look he gave Poppy, protective, possessive, and entirely too fond. She was in trouble. Big trouble. 15 minutes later, she'd managed to clean the finger paint off Poppy, wrestle her into fresh clothes, and was attempting to figure out how Tyler had managed to turn washable finger paints into something that appeared to be permanent when she heard raised voices from Dante's office. She could make out his voice, tense with barely controlled anger, and another voice, older, speaking rapid Japanese. The conversation was clearly not going well. That's when Poppy made her escape attempt number 2. One moment she was sitting contentedly in her playpen, the next she was crawling at top speed toward Dante's office, somehow having acquired more finger paint and what looked like a permanent marker. "Oh no," Ivy breathed, chasing after her. "Poppy, stop." But Poppy was on a mission. She reached Dante's office door, which was, of course, slightly ajar, and pushed it open with all the determination of a tiny, naked battering ram. Ivy arrived just in time to see her daughter crawl directly into frame of Dante's video call, rainbow handprints decorating her entire body, marker clutched in one fist like a weapon of mass destruction. On the screen, she could see 5 very serious-looking Japanese businessmen in expensive suits, their expressions shifting from professional courtesy to bewildered shock as they took in the sight of a naked, paint-covered baby invading their high-stakes negotiation. "I am so sorry," Ivy said, diving into the frame to scoop up Poppy. "She's an escape artist. I swear she was in her playpen 30 seconds ago." One of the men on the screen said something in rapid Japanese. Another started laughing. A third looked like he was having some kind of breakdown. Dante's face had gone carefully blank, the expression of a man watching his business empire crumble in real time. "Gentlemen," he said with admirable calm, "perhaps we could reschedule this call for—" But he was interrupted by Poppy, who chose that moment to blow a spectacular raspberry at the camera, sending a spray of drool across the screen, before babbling what sounded distinctly like, "Hi, hi, hi," while waving the marker enthusiastically. The laughter from the Japanese businessmen was immediate and infectious. One of them said something that made the others laugh harder, and suddenly the entire call had devolved into cooing at the baby. "Your daughter is very spirited," one of them said in accented English. Ivy opened her mouth to correct him, but Dante spoke first. "Yes," he said, and there was something warm in his voice that made Ivy's chest tight. "She is." An hour later, after the call had ended with what was apparently a very successful deal, the Japanese executives had been completely charmed by Poppy's interruption. Ivy found herself sitting in the penthouse's living room while Dante paced in front of the windows. "I cannot believe," he said, "that a naked baby covered in finger paint just saved a $50 million deal." "She's got hidden talents," Ivy replied, bouncing a now clean and properly dressed Poppy on her knee. Mr. Yamamoto said she reminded him of his granddaughter. "He spent 20 minutes showing me photos on his phone. See, international diplomacy through baby chaos." Dante stopped pacing and looked at her. "You realize the stock market jumped 3 points after news of the deal broke? So Poppy's good for business. You should put that on her resume. A baby caused a stock market fluctuation. A very special baby." Dante sat down across from her, and Ivy caught that wild scent again, stronger now, tinged with something that might have been contentment. "This is insane," he said quietly. "What is?" "All of it. You being here. Tyler actually eating breakfast without trying to poison anyone. Your daughter single-handedly saving my biggest deal of the year." He looked at Poppy, who was now trying to eat her own foot. "I don't understand any of it." Ivy studied his face, the sharp angles, the careful control, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. "Maybe you don't have to understand it," she said softly. "Maybe you just have to let it happen." Before Dante could respond, Tyler appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over his shoulder and that calculating gleam back in his eyes. "I'm off to school," he announced. "But I thought you should know. I may have mentioned to my chemistry teacher that we have some really interesting cleaning supplies here. He's very excited to hear about my home experiments." Dante's eyes narrowed. "Tyler, have a great day," Tyler called, already heading for the elevator. "See you tonight." As the elevator doors closed behind him, Dante turned to Ivy with an expression of resigned dread. "What do you think the chances are that I come home to find my penthouse turned into a crater? With Tyler? Pretty high." Ivy stood up, settling Poppy on her hip. "But look on the bright side, if he does blow up the penthouse, at least you'll know he's not bored anymore." Dante stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. Really laughing, the kind of deep, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "You're completely insane," he said. "Takes one to know one," Ivy replied. "Now come on. We need to baby-proof this place before Poppy figures out how to hack your smart toilet." As she headed toward the kitchen, she heard Dante mutter behind her, "I don't want to know if that's even possible." "You're completely insane," he said. "Takes one to know one," Ivy replied. "Now come on. We need to baby-proof this place before Poppy figures out how to hack your smart toilet." As she headed toward the kitchen, she heard Dante mutter behind her, "I don't want to know if that's even possible." But he was still smiling when he said it. Chapter 3. 3 weeks into what Ivy had started thinking of as the most expensive babysitting job in history, she developed a routine. Wake up at 6, feed Poppy, convince Tyler that cereal was not an appropriate vehicle for his latest chemical experiments, dodge whatever crisis Dante was having with his business empire, and try to ignore the way her heart did acrobatics every time he smiled at her daughter. It was a good routine, a safe routine, which was probably why the universe decided to blow it up spectacularly on a Tuesday morning while she was hunting for her organic quinoa chips. Ivy had developed a serious addiction to the ridiculously expensive health food snacks that kept appearing in the penthouse pantry. Courtesy of Dante's housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, who seemed to have a sixth sense for what everyone needed before they knew they needed it. The quinoa chips were her weakness. Salty, crunchy, and probably cost more per ounce than her old apartment's rent. She'd tucked Poppy in for her morning nap and was rummaging through the pantry, searching for her fix, when she heard the distinctive sound of crunching from the kitchen. "Tyler, if you're eating my chips, I will hide your chemistry set somewhere you'll never find it," she called, stepping out of the pantry with a bag of organic kale crackers in her hand. The crunching stopped. Then she heard a low, rumbling sound that definitely didn't come from any 12-year-old human throat. Ivy froze, every instinct she'd developed from years of working night shifts in sketchy neighborhoods suddenly screaming danger. That sound, that was a growl. A big growl. Like, bigger than any dog she'd ever met growl. She crept toward the kitchen island, her heart hammering against her ribs, and peered around the corner. What she saw made her brain perform the mental equivalent of a complete system reboot. There was a wolf in Dante's kitchen. A massive, dark-furred wolf with winterstorm eyes, sitting on its haunches next to an absolutely demolished bag of her quinoa chips, crunching contentedly while chip crumbs decorated its muzzle. Ivy blinked hard, convinced she was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. But when she opened her eyes, the wolf was still there, and it was looking directly at her with an expression that somehow managed to convey both embarrassment and defiance. Those eyes. She knew those eyes. "Dante," she whispered. The wolf's ears flattened against its head, and if Ivy didn't know better, she'd swear it looked sheepish. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Oh my God, you're a..." The wolf whined softly and dropped its head, like a dog who'd been caught raiding the garbage. Which, Ivy realized with hysterical clarity, was essentially what had happened. Except the dog was actually her boss. Her very human, very alpha, very definitely not supposed to have fur boss. "You're stress-eating my snacks," she said faintly. "As a wolf. You shifted into a wolf to stress-eat my organic quinoa chips." The wolf's tail gave a tentative wag. Ivy sat down hard on the kitchen floor, her legs suddenly refusing to support her. "This is not happening. This is a hallucination. I've finally cracked from sleep deprivation, and I'm seeing werewolves in the kitchen." The wolf, Dante, made a soft huffing sound that might have been laughter if wolves could laugh. "Don't you dare find this funny," Ivy said, pointing an accusing finger at him. "This is not funny. This is. She couldn't finish the sentence because she didn't actually know what this was. Terrifying? Impossible? Weirdly endearing in the way that finding someone's secret comfort food stash was endearing? The air around Dante began to shimmer, and Ivy watched in fascination and horror as the wolf form dissolved, fur receding, limbs reshaping, until Dante was sitting naked on his kitchen floor, surrounded by the remains of her quinoa chips, looking more mortified than she'd ever seen him. "I can explain," he said quietly. Ivy stared at him, at his perfectly human face, his perfectly human shoulders, his perfectly human everything, and felt something between laughter and hysteria bubbling up in her chest. "You stress-eat," she said. "You're this big, scary alpha werewolf, and you stress-eat junk food. They're not junk food. They're organic. You're missing the point." "What's the point?" "The point is you're a werewolf." The words came out louder than she'd intended, echoing in the spacious kitchen. "You're an actual, literal werewolf, and I've been living here for 3 weeks not knowing that my boss occasionally turns into something that could eat me." Dante winced. "I would never hurt you. Either of you." "The wolf," he stopped, running a hand through his hair. "It's not like the movies, Ivy. I'm still me. I'm always me. But you're also a giant wolf who apparently has a weakness for overpriced snack foods. I was having a difficult morning. So you decided to shift and raid the pantry? It helps with the stress. The heightened senses, the physical release, it's meditative." Ivy stared at him, this powerful, intimidating man sitting naked on his kitchen floor, trying to explain werewolf therapy through snack consumption, and felt her world tilt sideways. "I need air," she said, scrambling to her feet. "I need to think. I need those chips you just destroyed." She turned to flee and nearly ran straight into Tyler, who was standing in the kitchen doorway with his backpack slung over his shoulder and an expression of mild interest. "Oh good," he said cheerfully. "You finally figured it out. I was wondering how long it would take." Ivy whirled to stare at him. "You knew." "Of course I knew. He's my uncle. Plus, he's really obvious about it when he thinks no one's looking. The sniffing thing alone is a dead giveaway." "The sniffing thing?" "He scent marks everything. Your stuff especially. Very territorial. Classic alpha behavior." Ivy turned back to Dante, who had at least had the courtesy to grab a kitchen towel to preserve some modesty. You've been scent marking my things? It's unconscious, Dante said defensively. And barely noticeable to humans. But noticeable to other werewolves? Yes. So anyone like you who comes near me will know I'm... What? Your property. Something dangerous flickered in Dante's eyes. You're not property. You're pack. The word hit Ivy like a physical blow. Pack. She knew what that meant to alphas, to werewolves. It meant family. It meant protection. It meant belonging to something bigger than yourself. It meant claims and bonds and complications she absolutely could not afford. I need to go, she said, backing toward the door. I need to think about this. Ivy, wait. But she was already fleeing, Tyler stepping aside to let her pass with an expression that was far too knowing for a 12-year-old. She made it as far as the elevator before she realized she couldn't actually leave. Poppy was still napping, and despite the fact that her boss had just revealed himself to be a supernatural creature, she wasn't about to abandon her daughter. Instead, she found herself in the penthouse's library, a room she'd barely explored, filled with leather-bound books and the kind of comfortable chairs that cost more than cars. She curled up in one of them and tried to process what had just happened. Dante was a werewolf. Her gorgeous, brooding, impossibly controlling boss was an actual werewolf who stress-ate organic snacks and apparently considered her pack. The smart thing would be to quit. Pack up Poppy, walk away, find another job cleaning toilets, and pretend this whole insane chapter of her life had never happened. The problem was she didn't want to leave. Despite the supernatural revelation, despite the danger it represented, despite every logical reason she should run, she wanted to stay. Which was probably the most terrifying realization of all. She was still sitting there, staring blankly at a first-edition copy of something by Dickens, when Tyler appeared in the doorway. So, he said, settling into the chair across from her with the casual confidence of someone much older. Werewolves. Big adjustment. You could say that. Want some advice? Ivy looked at him, really looked at him. Tyler might be 12, but his eyes held an old soul's understanding of loss and adaptation. Sure, she said. Hit me with your wisdom. Uncle Dante's not actually scary. He just thinks he is. The wolf thing makes him feel like he's dangerous, so he tries to control everything and everyone around him to keep them safe. It's actually kind of pathetic. Pathetic. He's been alone for so long he's forgotten how to be around people who aren't afraid of him. Then you showed up with Poppy, and suddenly he's got 2 people in his space who treat him like he's just normal. It's freaking him out. Ivy considered this. Is that why he offered me this job? Because I'm not afraid of him? Partly. Also because you're the first person who's ever made him laugh. And because Poppy thinks he hung the moon, which does weird things to his alpha brain. What kind of weird things? Tyler's grin was sharp. The kind where he starts thinking about keeping you both forever. Ivy's stomach dropped. Tyler, relax. He's not going to chain you in the basement or anything. But he's definitely planning to make it very hard for you to leave. That's... Ivy searched for words. That's not normal. Nothing about Uncle Dante is normal. But he's not a bad guy. Just a really lonely one who's finally found something he wants to protect. Before Ivy could respond, Tyler stood up and shouldered his backpack. Where are you going? School. But first, I'm going to stop by the kitchen supply store. Why? Tyler's grin widened. Because if we're going to have a werewolf in the house, we need proper supplies. Silver cutlery, garlic, maybe some wolfsbane if I can find it. Tyler, that's not. I know it won't actually work. But it'll be hilarious to watch Uncle Dante's face when he sees it. With that, he was gone, leaving Ivy alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. She spent the rest of the morning researching werewolves on her phone, which turned out to be an exercise in frustration, since most of the information was either folklore or terrible romance novels. By the time Poppy woke up from her nap, Ivy had learned exactly nothing useful about living with supernatural creatures and everything about how to properly organize a pantry. She'd gotten distracted by a home organization blog. Dante was nowhere to be seen when she emerged from the library with Poppy, though she could hear him on a conference call in his office, his voice carrying that controlled tension she was beginning to recognize as his default stress response. She was attempting to make lunch while keeping Poppy entertained when Tyler returned home with several shopping bags and a gleeful expression. Success, he announced, unpacking his haul onto the kitchen island. 1 complete werewolf defense kit. Ivy watched in amazement as he revealed an impressive collection of silver serving pieces, several bulbs of garlic, what appeared to be a wooden stake, and a small bottle labeled holy water. that she was fairly certain he'd filled from the tap. "Tyler, this is ridiculous. This is thorough preparation." He held up a silver salad fork. "Did you know that pure silver is supposed to burn werewolves on contact? Did you know that's complete nonsense?" "Probably. But imagine Uncle Dante's face when he sees I've replaced all his regular cutlery with silver." Despite everything, Ivy found herself smiling. "You're terrible. I'm creative. There's a difference." They spent the afternoon werewolf-proofing the penthouse, with Tyler providing running commentary on werewolf mythology while Ivy tried to keep Poppy from eating the garlic. It was ridiculous, completely pointless, and exactly the kind of absurd distraction she needed. Dante emerged from his office around 5, took one look at the kitchen, now festooned with garlic and gleaming with silver cutlery, and stopped dead. "What," he said carefully, "is this?" "Werewolf defense system," Tyler said proudly. Ivy helped. Dante's gaze moved to Ivy, who was holding Poppy and trying not to laugh at his expression. "You helped werewolf-proof my kitchen against me?" "Tyler needed a project," Ivy said. "And I needed to do something that didn't involve thinking about things. Things. Wolf things. Pack things. Things that are too complicated for a Tuesday afternoon." Something soft crossed Dante's face. "Ivy, don't," she said quietly. "Not yet. I'm still processing." He nodded, then picked up one of the silver forks and examined it. Sterling silver. Expensive choice. "I have excellent taste," Tyler said. "Also, I used your credit card." "Of course you did." Dante set the fork down and looked at the garlic hanging from the light fixtures. "I assume you know this won't actually work." "That's what makes it funny." Dante's mouth quirked upward. "Fair enough." The rest of the evening passed in surprisingly comfortable normalcy. They ate dinner with the silver cutlery. Dante showed no adverse effects. Tyler regaled them with stories about his chemistry teacher's latest breakdown, and Poppy performed her nightly routine of charming everyone in a 50-foot radius. It wasn't until after Tyler had grudgingly gone to bed and Poppy was settled in her crib that Ivy found herself alone with Dante in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with their ridiculous silver dishes. "You've been avoiding me all day," Dante said quietly, handing her a plate. "I've been processing." "And what conclusion have you reached?" Ivy considered her words carefully. "I've concluded that you load the dishwasher wrong." Dante blinked. "I'm sorry. The plates. You're putting them in backwards. The dirty side needs to face the center where the spray arms are. I've been loading dishwashers this way for 15 years. And you've been doing it wrong for 15 years. Ivy turned the plate around to demonstrate. "See, dirty side toward the center. It's basic physics. It's a dishwasher, not a rocket ship. It's a machine with a specific function that requires proper technique to achieve optimal results." "Optimal results?" Dante's voice had taken on an edge. "It's washing dishes, Ivy. Not performing surgery. If you're going to do something, you should do it right. I am doing it right. You're doing it your way. There's a difference." Dante moved closer and Ivy caught that wild scent again, stronger now, tinged with frustration and something else that made her pulse quicken. "My way works perfectly fine. Your way is inefficient and stubborn." "Stubborn?" His voice had dropped to that low, dangerous tone that probably made boardrooms full of executives wet themselves. "I'm stubborn. Incredibly stubborn. You probably have a whole staff of people who are too intimidated to tell you you're loading the dishwasher wrong." "Nobody tells me I'm doing anything wrong." "Well, somebody should. Starting with basic kitchen appliance operation." They were standing very close now, close enough that Ivy could see the gold flecks in his storm gray eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You," Dante said quietly, "are the most infuriating woman I've ever met." "And you," Ivy replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "are the most arrogant man I've ever met." "I'm not arrogant. I'm confident." "There's a difference?" "A significant one." "Prove it." The words hung in the air between them, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with dishwasher loading techniques, and everything to do with the way Dante was looking at her, like she was something precious and dangerous and absolutely necessary. "Ivy," he said, her name a warning. "What?" "If I prove it, everything changes." She should step back. She should remember that he was her boss, that she was his employee, that he was a werewolf, and she was a single mother with no business getting involved with supernatural creatures who had more money than small countries. Instead, she stepped closer. "Maybe I want everything to change." Dante's control snapped like a rubber band stretched too tight. His mouth crashed down on hers with a hunger that stole her breath and set her blood on fire. This wasn't the gentle, tentative kiss of new attraction. This was raw need and desperate wanting, and 3 weeks of pretending they didn't affect each other combusting all at once. Ivy kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, needing more contact, more heat, more of whatever this was that made her feel like she was flying and falling at the same time. Dante's hands slid into her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, and Ivy made a sound she didn't recognize, something between a moan and a sigh that seemed to drive him wild. He lifted her onto the kitchen island without breaking the kiss, his hands spanning her waist, and Ivy wrapped her legs around him, drawing him closer. The granite was cool against her back as Dante kissed his way down her throat, finding that sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder that made her arch against him. His teeth grazed her skin, not quite a bite but close enough to make her gasp, and she felt him smile against her throat. "Is this proving it?" he murmured against her skin. "Proving what?" Ivy's voice came out breathless and wrecked. "The difference between arrogant and confident. I'm not sure. You might need to provide more evidence." Dante laughed, the sound low and rough, and kissed her again. This time it was slower, deeper, a thorough exploration that made her toes curl and her heart race. She could taste the wildness in him, pine forests and storm clouds, and something untamed that called to every omega instinct she possessed. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, desperate to feel skin against skin, and she was fumbling with the second button when there was an ominous cracking sound. They froze, lips still inches apart, breathing hard. "Did you hear?" Ivy started. The granite countertop split cleanly down the middle with a sound like thunder. They stared at the ruined kitchen island, then at each other. "Did we just," Ivy began, "break the kitchen island?" Dante finished. "Apparently. With kissing. Very enthusiastic kissing." Ivy looked at the cracked granite, then back at Dante's face and started laughing. Not the polite chuckle of social situations, but the kind of deep, uncontrollable laughter that came from shock and relief, and the absolute absurdity of breaking furniture with the force of sexual tension. Dante stared at her like she'd lost her mind, which only made her laugh harder. "We broke your kitchen island," she gasped between giggles. "We broke a piece of granite with making out. How is that even possible?" "Enhanced strength," Dante said faintly. "When emotions run high, sometimes the wolf." "Oh God!" Ivy wiped tears from her eyes. "You literally broke your kitchen with superhuman strength because I was arguing with you about dishwasher loading techniques. When you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "It is ridiculous. We're ridiculous." Ivy looked at the destroyed countertop again and dissolved into fresh giggles. "Mrs. Chun is going to have questions. Mrs. Chun has seen stranger things. Stranger than us destroying expensive kitchen fixtures through aggressive kissing?" Dante's mouth quirked upward. "You'd be surprised." They stood there in the wreckage of what had probably been a $10,000 piece of granite, looking at each other with the kind of shell-shocked expression people wore after natural disasters. "So," Ivy said finally. That happened, Dante agreed. "And now your kitchen island is in 2 pieces. It was ugly anyway." Ivy snorted. "It was not ugly. It was gorgeous. And expensive. And now it's destroyed because you have superhuman strength and no impulse control." "I have excellent impulse control. Evidence suggests otherwise. Evidence suggests that you're a very distracting woman. Evidence suggests that you need to work on your anger management techniques." "I wasn't angry." "No. I was." Dante paused, searching for words. "Frustrated. Aroused. Possibly having a minor breakdown over the fact that you reorganized my entire life in 3 weeks." "I didn't reorganize anything. I just showed up." "Exactly." He stepped closer, carefully avoiding the cracked granite. "You just showed up, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about my life doesn't apply anymore." Ivy felt her heart do that flutter thing again. "Dante, I know this is complicated. I know I should probably let you quit and find someone normal to work for. Someone human. But I can't." His voice was quiet, vulnerable in a way that made her chest tight. "I can't let you go, Ivy. I don't want to." She looked at him, this powerful, dangerous, impossibly complicated man who'd just destroyed his own furniture kissing her, and felt something settle into place in her chest. "Good," she said simply. "Because I don't want to go." Relief flooded his face. "Really? Really? Although we're going to need to discuss the whole superhuman strength thing. And probably invest in stronger furniture." Dante laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I'll add it to the list." "What list?" "The list of things I need to explain about being a werewolf. It's getting long." "We have time," Ivy said, and meant it. Whatever this was between them, complicated, impossible, potentially furniture-destroying, she wanted to see where it led. "We have time," Ivy said, and meant it. Whatever this was between them, complicated, impossible, potentially furniture-destroying, she wanted to see where it led. Even if it meant learning to live with a werewolf who stress-ate her snacks, and apparently had very strong opinions about dishwasher loading techniques. Chapter 4. Ivy should have known that 3 weeks of relative peace was too good to last. She should have recognized the signs. Poppy being unusually fussy, her own restless sleep, the way Dante kept checking his phone with increasingly tense expressions. But she'd been too caught up in the strange new reality of living with a werewolf who made her laugh and kissed her senseless and looked at her daughter like she hung the moon. So when the doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. on a Thursday morning, disrupting Poppy's carefully scheduled playtime and Tyler's attempt to teach her to stack blocks into structurally sound architectural marvels, Ivy answered it without thinking. The face that greeted her through the penthouse's security monitor made her blood turn to ice water. Garrett Mills stood in the lobby wearing his respectable citizen costume, pressed khakis, polo shirt, the kind of fake smile that had once fooled her into thinking he was charming instead of calculating. He looked exactly the same as he had 18 months ago when she'd fled their shared apartment with nothing but a diaper bag and her determination to never let him hurt her again. "Ivy, baby," his voice crackled through the intercom, honey-sweet and poisonous. "We need to talk." Her finger hovered over the disconnect button, but Garrett continued before she could cut him off. "It's about our daughter. I have rights, you know. Legal rights that you can't just ignore by hiding out in some rich guy's tower. Our daughter." The words hit Ivy like a physical blow. Poppy wasn't Garrett's, had never been Garrett's, despite what her birth certificate said. But biology and legal documentation were two very different things, and Garrett had always been excellent at manipulating systems to his advantage. "Miss Reeves," the building's security guard appeared on the monitor beside Garrett. "This gentleman says he's here to see you about a family matter. Should I send him up?" Ivy looked at Garrett's face, at the smug confidence that said he knew she couldn't avoid him forever, and felt that familiar knot of fear and fury tangle in her chest. "Send him up," she said quietly. She spent the 3 minutes it took for the elevator to reach the penthouse trying to convince herself she could handle this. Garrett was just a man, a narcissistic, manipulative, occasionally violent man, but still human. Still killable by normal means, unlike certain werewolves who could apparently break granite countertops with their bare hands. She could handle one pathetic human male. The elevator chimed, and Garrett stepped into the penthouse like he owned it, his gaze sweeping over the marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows with unconcealed avarice. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of mockery. "Ivy Reeves living the high life. Who would have thought the little cleaning lady would land herself a sugar daddy? What do you want, Garrett?" "What I've always wanted. My family back." His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Starting with my daughter." "Poppy isn't your daughter. DNA says otherwise." Garrett pulled a manila envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto the ruined kitchen island, the one she and Dante still hadn't figured out how to explain to Mrs. Chun. "Court-ordered paternity test. 99.7% certainty." Ivy's hands shook as she picked up the envelope, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "This is fake. Is it? Are you willing to bet our daughter's future on that assumption? You walked out on me when I was 6 months pregnant. You said the baby wasn't your problem. I was young and scared. I've grown up since then." Garrett's expression shifted to what he probably thought was contrite sincerity. It looked like a shark trying to appear vegetarian. "I want to be a father to Poppy. I want us to be a family again. Over my dead body." "That can be arranged," Garrett said pleasantly, then laughed as if he'd made a joke. "But I'd prefer to do this the civilized way. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous arrangement. I'm not for sale. Everyone's for sale, Ivy. It's just a matter of finding the right price." Garrett gestured around the penthouse. "Speaking of which, how exactly are you affording all this? Because I know what hotel cleaning pays, and it's not penthouse in the sky money. That's none of your business." "Oh, but it is. See, when I file for custody, and I will file very soon, the court's going to want to know about your living situation. Your income. Your associations." His smile turned predatory. A single mother living with a man she's not married to, especially a man with Dante Ashford's reputation? That raises questions about moral fitness, doesn't it? Ivy felt the blood drain from her face. "You bastard. I'm pragmatic. And I'm patient. I've been watching you, Ivy. Following your new life, documenting your choices. The courts don't look kindly on mothers who expose their children to dangerous men. Dante isn't dangerous. Isn't he? Dante Ashford is known for his temper, his ruthless business practices, his habit of destroying anyone who gets in his way. Is that really the environment you want to raise our daughter in? The word "our" made Ivy's skin crawl, but she forced herself to stay calm. Garrett fed on emotional reactions. The angrier she got, the more ammunition he'd have. "What do you really want?" she asked quietly. "I told you. My daughter. And you, if you'll have me back." Garrett stepped closer, and Ivy caught the familiar scent of expensive cologne mixed with something rotten underneath. "I've missed you, baby. We were good together. We were never good together. You hit me. I was drinking too much back then. I've been sober for 8 months. Garrett's voice took on that wheedling tone she remembered from his apologies. "I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. For you. For us. There is no us. There could be. I'm doing well now, Ivy. Really well. New job, new apartment, new perspective on life. I can take care of you and Poppy the way you deserve." Ivy looked at his clothes. Expensive but not quite expensive enough. His watch that was probably a knockoff. The way his eyes kept cataloging the penthouse's contents like he was planning an estate sale. "You're broke," she realized. "That's what this is about. You think if you get custody of Poppy, you can use her to get money from me." From Dante. Garrett's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "I think our daughter deserves to know her father. Everything else is just practical considerations." "Get out." "I don't think so. See, I have legal standing now. These DNA results give me rights, and I intend to exercise them. I'll be back tomorrow with my lawyer to discuss a custody arrangement. I suggest you use the time to think about what's best for Poppy." "I know what's best for Poppy. It's never seeing you again. We'll let the courts decide that." Garrett headed toward the elevator, then paused. "Oh, and Ivy? You might want to ask your boyfriend about his background. I did some digging, and Dante Ashford has quite the reputation for making problems disappear. Permanently. The courts will find that very interesting." The elevator doors closed behind him, leaving Ivy alone with the manila envelope, and a terror so complete it made her legs give out. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking as she stared at the falsified DNA results that could destroy her life. She was still sitting there when Dante emerged from his office, his expression shifting from casual concern to alarm the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" He was beside her in an instant, his scent wrapping around her like comfort and safety. "Ivy, what's wrong?" "My ex," she said numbly. "Garrett. He was here." Dante went very still. "Here. In the penthouse. He has fake DNA results saying he's Poppy's father. He wants custody." Ivy looked up at Dante, seeing her fear reflected in his storm-gray eyes. "He's going to try to take her away from me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. When Dante spoke, his voice was carefully controlled, but Ivy could hear the wolf underneath, predatory, lethal, barely leashed. "Over my dead body. He's not supernatural, Dante. He's just a narcissistic human who sees Poppy as his meal ticket. I can handle him." "Can you?" Dante's eyes were beginning to shift color, the gray bleeding into gold. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he just terrorized you in your own home." "This isn't my home. This is your home, and I'm just..." "What? Just what, Ivy?" The words caught in her throat. "Just another charity case. Just another stray you picked up. Just someone you're helping out of misplaced alpha guilt." "Nothing," she said instead. "I just need to figure out how to fight this legally." "I can make him disappear," Dante said quietly. "One phone call, and Garrett Mills becomes a footnote in missing persons files." Ivy stared at him, seeing the truth in his face. He wasn't making an idle threat. He was offering to commit murder for her, casually, like it was a reasonable solution to an everyday problem. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not. Ivy." "No, Dante. I won't let you destroy your life for mine. And I won't let Poppy grow up knowing her mother's, whatever I am to you, is a killer." "You're not whatever you are to me," Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm what? Your employee? Your charity project? The woman who's convenient to have around until the novelty wears off." Dante looked like she'd slapped him. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think. 3 weeks ago I was cleaning toilets for minimum wage, and now I'm living in a penthouse with a werewolf who kisses me like it means something and offers to commit murder for me like it's no big deal. I don't know what's real anymore." "This is real," Dante said, reaching for her hands. "What's between us?" What's between us is complicated and impossible and based on proximity and convenience, Ivy said, pulling away from his touch even though it physically hurt to do so. You feel responsible for me because I'm an Omega living in your territory. That's all this is. That's not. It is, Ivy said firmly. And that's fine. I'm grateful for everything you've done for me and Poppy. But I won't let you ruin your life trying to fix mine. Dante stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through hurt, anger, and something that looked like desperation. Fine, he said finally. Handle it yourself. But when this goes sideways, and it will go sideways, don't expect me to stand by and watch him hurt you. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ivy alone with her fear and the growing certainty that she'd just made a terrible mistake. What she didn't know was that Tyler had been recording everything from his hiding spot behind the kitchen counter, his phone capturing every moment of Garrett's visit with the focused intensity of a filmmaker documenting a natural disaster. 20 minutes later, Tyler emerged from his hiding spot and settled at the kitchen table with his laptop, a bag of chips, and the kind of creative vengeance that only a 12-year-old could conceive. World's Worst Baby Daddy Episode 1, he muttered, beginning to edit the footage. This is going to be epic. The next morning, Ivy woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. She fumbled for it, expecting to see missed calls from Garrett or his lawyer, but instead found dozens of notifications from social media platforms she didn't even have accounts on. What the hell? She mumbled, sitting up in bed. Tyler appeared in her doorway, fully dressed and grinning like he'd won the lottery. You're famous, he announced. Well, Garrett is famous. Famously pathetic. What are you talking about? Tyler held up his phone, showing her a TikTok video with 2.3 million views and counting. The thumbnail showed Garrett's face mid-sneer with the caption, "When the deadbeat baby daddy thinks he hit the jackpot." Tyler, what did you do? I documented a predator in his natural habitat, Tyler said proudly. The internet is very interested in Garrett Mills and his creative approach to extortion. Ivy grabbed his phone and watched in horror as her private nightmare played out for millions of strangers. Tyler had edited the footage with devastating precision, highlighting every manipulative comment, every threat, every moment where Garrett revealed his true nature. The comments were brutal. This man is literally garbage in human form. Someone please tell me this woman got away from this psycho. The audacity of men never ceases to amaze me. Plot twist. She's living with someone who could buy and sell this loser's entire existence. Update please. Did this trash human get what he deserved? Tyler, Ivy said weakly. This has 12 million views. 12.3 million and climbing. It's been shared on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, which is weird but hilarious. Garrett Mills is officially internet famous. This is a disaster. This is justice. Also, several family law attorneys have offered to represent you pro bono. A private investigator wants to help prove the DNA results are fake, and someone claiming to be a producer from a true crime podcast wants to interview you. Ivy stared at the screen, watching the view count climb in real time. He's going to be furious. He's going to be unemployable. Turns out his new job was at a family-friendly company that does not appreciate employees who threaten single mothers on the internet. How do you know that? Tyler's grin was sharp. The internet is very thorough when it decides to investigate someone. Garrett Mills is having what you might call a very bad day. As if summoned by their conversation, Ivy's phone rang. Garrett's name appeared on the screen, and even through the phone she could hear him screaming. Don't answer it, Tyler advised. Let him leave a voicemail. I'm betting it'll be perfect for episode 2. Ivy looked at her phone, then at Tyler, then at the video that had somehow turned her private hell into public vindication. I can't believe you did this, she said. I can't believe you thought you had to handle this alone, Tyler replied. You're pack, Ivy. That means we protect each other. Pack. There was that word again, carrying all the weight of belonging and loyalty and family that she'd never thought she deserved. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Reeves, this is Patricia Williams from Williams & Associates Family Law. I saw the video and would like to offer my services free of charge. Mr. Mills' behavior is unacceptable, and I have significant experience with cases involving falsified paternity tests and parental extortion. Then another. Ivy, this is Detective Sarah Chun from the Domestic Violence Unit. The video shows clear evidence of harassment and threats. Please call me when you're ready to file charges. And another. Hi. I'm Jessica from the Victims' Rights Foundation. We'd like to help connect you with resources and support. What happened to you is not okay. Ivy stared at her phone as message after message poured in. Lawyers, advocates, support groups, and hundreds of strangers offering encouragement and help. The internet can be terrible, Tyler said quietly. But sometimes it's wonderful. Sometimes it sees injustice and decides to fix it. Tyler, Ivy said, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't name. Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. But this was just phase 1. There's a phase 2. Tyler's grin was positively diabolical. Oh, there's definitely a phase 2. I'm thinking a deep dive into Garrett's financial records, his employment history, maybe some interviews with his ex-girlfriends. The internet is very good at pattern recognition. Ivy looked at this 12-year-old who had just weaponized social media in her defense and felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. You're terrifying, she said fondly. I'm thorough. There's a difference. From down the hall, she could hear Dante on a phone call, his voice carrying that controlled fury she was beginning to recognize as his response to threats against his pack. He was probably calling in favors, mobilizing resources, preparing to wage war on her behalf whether she wanted him to or not. And for the first time since Garrett had appeared at her door, Ivy felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Tyler, she said quietly. Yeah. When you make episode 2, can you include a message from me? What kind of message? Ivy smiled, and it felt like the first real smile she'd managed in days. The kind that lets Garrett know that I'm not the same scared girl who ran away 18 months ago. The kind that tells him exactly what he's up against now. Tyler's answering grin could have powered a small city. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Chapter 5. The family courthouse looked like every government building Ivy had ever been intimidated by. All beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and the kind of institutional furniture designed to make regular people feel small and powerless. She sat in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, bouncing Poppy on her knee and trying not to throw up from pure anxiety. Her court-appointed attorney, Marcus Webb, was supposed to meet her 45 minutes ago. Instead, she had 17 missed calls from his office, a voicemail explaining that he was stuck in emergency surgery. Apparently Marcus Webb moonlighted as a brain surgeon, which seemed unlikely, and Tyler crouched behind a potted plant across the hall, adjusting something that looked suspiciously like a tiny microphone. This is insane, Ivy muttered under her breath. What's insane is that the public defender system thinks one overworked lawyer can handle 47 cases in a single day. Tyler's voice crackled through the nearly invisible earpiece he'd somehow convinced her to wear. But don't worry. I've been binge-watching legal dramas and true crime podcasts all week. I basically have a law degree now. You're 12. I'm intellectually advanced for my age. Now stop talking to me out loud. People are staring. Ivy glanced around and noticed that several people in the hallway were indeed looking at her with expressions ranging from curious to concerned. She probably looked like a crazy person, talking to herself while bouncing a baby and wearing what Tyler had insisted was courtroom-appropriate attire. A navy dress she'd borrowed from Mrs. Chun that was 2 sizes too big and made her look like she was playing dress-up. Across the hall, Garrett sat with his lawyer, a sharp-suited woman with predatory eyes and the kind of expensive haircut that probably cost more than Ivy's monthly grocery budget. They were reviewing documents and looking smugly confident, which made Ivy's stomach churn harder. But it was the third party that made her blood run cold. Her parents sat beside Garrett's lawyer like they belonged there, her mother resplendent in Chanel and disapproval, her father checking his Rolex with the impatient air of a man who had more important places to be. Victoria and Edmund Hartwell looked exactly the same as they had 2 years ago when they'd told her she was no longer their daughter. Perfectly groomed, perfectly cold, and perfectly convinced of their own moral superiority. Tyler, Ivy whispered, turning toward the plant. My parents are here. I see them. The ones who look like they stepped out of a catalog for wealthy people who hate their children. Those are the ones. Why are they here? Before Ivy could answer, the courtroom doors opened and a bailiff called, Hartwell versus Reeves, custody hearing. Ivy's legs felt like jelly as she stood, but she forced herself to walk into the courtroom with as much dignity as she could muster. The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, was already reviewing files. Your Honor, Garrett's lawyer stood smoothly. I'm Amanda Cross representing Mr. Garrett Mills in his petition for full custody of the minor child Poppy Mills. Poppy Reeves, Ivy corrected automatically, then realized she'd just spoken out of turn in a courtroom. Judge Patricia Morrison looked up with raised eyebrows. Ms. Reeves, where is your representation? He had an emergency, Your Honor. Surgery. Brain surgery. I see. Would you like to request a continuance to secure other counsel? Ivy looked at Garrett's satisfied smirk, at her parents' expectant faces, at Poppy babbling happily in her arms, oblivious to the fact that her entire future was being decided by strangers. No, Your Honor. I'll represent myself. Objection. Tyler's voice crackled through the earpiece. I mean, object to nothing. You're doing great. Just remember, hearsay is generally inadmissible, burden of proof is on the petitioner, and never let them see you sweat. Judge Morrison looked skeptical but nodded. Very well. Ms. Cross, you may proceed with your opening statement. Amanda Cross launched into a presentation that was clearly designed to destroy Ivy's credibility as a mother. She painted a picture of an unstable woman living in an inappropriate environment with a dangerous man, unable to provide proper care for her child. Furthermore, Your Honor, Cross continued, Mr. Mills has recently discovered that Ms. Reeves has been deliberately keeping him from his daughter, despite court-ordered DNA evidence proving his paternity. She held up the manila envelope Garrett had brought to the penthouse, and Ivy felt her heart sink. The falsified results looked official, complete with laboratory letterhead and signatures. DNA evidence establishes Mr. Mills as the biological father with 99.7% certainty, Cross continued. He has been denied his parental rights for nearly 10 months, during which time Ms. Reeves has been living in an unstable situation with multiple male partners. That's not true, Ivy said, half rising from her chair. Ms. Reeves, Judge Morrison said gently, you'll have your chance to respond. Ms. Cross, continue. Thank you, Your Honor. Additionally, we have evidence that Ms. Reeves has been engaging in behavior that puts the child at risk. Living with Dante Ashford, a man known for his violent temper and criminal associations. Objection. Ivy stood fully this time. That's character assassination. Sustained, Judge Morrison said, but she looked troubled. Ms. Cross, please stick to facts relevant to the custody matter. Of course, Your Honor. The facts are simple. Mr. Mills is a stable, employed father who wants to provide a proper home for his daughter. Ms. Reeves is an unmarried mother with no permanent address, living on the charity of a man with a documented history of violence. Cross sat down looking satisfied, and Ivy felt like she was drowning. Everything the woman had said was technically true, but completely wrong, twisted to make her sound like an unfit mother. Ms. Reeves, Judge Morrison prompted. Your response. Ivy stood on shaking legs, Poppy still in her arms, and looked at the faces staring back at her. Garrett's smugness, her parents' disapproval, the judge's cautious sympathy. Take a deep breath, Tyler's voice whispered in her ear. Start with the paternity test. Attack the evidence. Your Honor, Ivy began, her voice stronger than she felt. The DNA test presented by Mr. Mills is fraudulent. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Reeves. Do you have evidence to support that claim? Ivy's heart sank. She had suspicions, she had Tyler's internet research, she had her own certainty that Garrett couldn't be Poppy's father. But she didn't have proof. I know it's fake because she's desperate, Amanda Cross interrupted. Your Honor, Ms. Reeves has been denying Mr. Mills access to his daughter for months. Of course she would claim the DNA test is fraudulent. The DNA test is fake, a new voice said from the gallery, because I ran the real one. Every head in the courtroom turned to see Dante standing in the back row, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else but unable to stay silent. Ivy's heart did something complicated at the sight of him. Relief, gratitude, and a terror that he was about to destroy his own reputation to save hers. Sir, Judge Morrison said sternly, you are not a party to these proceedings. Please sit down or leave the courtroom. Your Honor, Dante said, walking forward with the kind of controlled confidence that made boardrooms fall silent. I believe I have relevant information about the paternity question. Dante, don't, Ivy whispered, but he was already pulling documents from his jacket. I had an independent DNA test conducted 3 weeks ago when Mr. Mills first made his claims, Dante said, handing papers to the bailiff. The results show 0 probability of paternity. Amanda Cross shot to her feet. Your Honor, this man has no legal standing to order DNA tests. This is completely inadmissible. The test was conducted with the mother's consent, Dante replied calmly, using samples from both the child and Mr. Mills that were obtained legally. How did you get samples from my client? Dante's smile was all teeth. Mr. Mills left a coffee cup in the lobby of my building. I believe the legal term is abandoned property. Judge Morrison looked at the documents, her expression shifting from skepticism to interest. These results are from Patterson Genetics. They're a reputable laboratory. Your Honor, Cross said desperately. Even if this test is legitimate, it doesn't negate our client's rights. He believed in good faith that he was the father. Based on falsified documents, Dante said quietly. Which suggests fraud, not good faith. The courtroom was silent except for Poppy's happy babbling as she tried to eat her own fist. Ivy stared at Dante, overwhelmed by gratitude and terror in equal measure. Your Honor, she said, finding her voice again, if I may address the living situation concerns? Judge Morrison nodded, and Ivy took a shaky breath. Mr. Ashford isn't my boyfriend or partner. He's my employer. I work as his domestic staff, and housing is part of my compensation package. It's a legitimate employment arrangement, not whatever Ms. Cross is implying. It was technically true if incomplete. Dante's face remained carefully neutral, but Ivy caught the flash of something. Hurt? Disappointment in his eyes. Furthermore, Ivy continued, Mr. Mills is misrepresenting our relationship. He was never involved in my pregnancy or Poppy's birth. He walked out on me when I was 6 months pregnant, saying the baby wasn't his problem. He's only interested in custody now because he thinks it will give him access to money. These are serious allegations, Ms. Reeves, Judge Morrison said. Can you provide evidence? Tell her about the TikTok, Tyler whispered through the earpiece. There's video evidence of Mr. Mills' actual motivations, Ivy said. It's been viewed over 15 million times on social media. Amanda Cross looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Your Honor, social media posts are not legitimate evidence in family court proceedings. They are if they show a pattern of behavior relevant to the case, Judge Morrison replied dryly. I'll review the video during our brief recess. But before the judge could call for a break, Victoria Hartwell stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, if I may, she said in the cultured tones that had once made Ivy feel small and worthless. I believe there are additional factors the court should consider. And you are? Victoria Hartwell. I'm Poppy's grandmother. The words hit Ivy like a physical blow. She turned to stare at her mother, seeing the cold calculation in her perfectly made-up face. Ivy is our daughter, Victoria continued, though we've been estranged due to her unfortunate choices. We're prepared to offer a stable, traditional home for Poppy if the court finds both current parties unsuitable. What? Ivy breathed. Edmund Hartwell stood beside his wife, his expression as cold as marble. We have significant resources and a stable home environment. We believe Poppy would be better served in our care than with either of these people. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about Garrett wanting custody. This was about her parents wanting to steal Poppy, to raise her as their legitimate heir while cutting Ivy out entirely. Tell me you're not working with them, Ivy said, turning to Garrett. Tell me you didn't sell my daughter to my parents. Garrett's smile was pure poison. They made a very compelling offer. Full custody to me, primary residence with them. Everyone gets what they want. Except me. And Poppy. Poppy gets a proper family and a real future. You get to go back to cleaning toilets where you belong. The sound that came from the gallery was not quite human. A low, rumbling growl that made every person in the courtroom turn toward Dante. His eyes had shifted from gray to gold. His hands were clenched into fists, and the air around him seemed to shimmer with barely contained violence. Mr. Ashford, Judge Morrison said sharply, control yourself or I'll have you removed from my courtroom. Dante's chest rose and fell in deep, controlled breaths, but the gold didn't fade from his eyes. Ivy could see him struggling against his wolf, against every instinct that demanded he eliminate the threats to his pack. Your Honor, Ivy said desperately, my parents disowned me 2 years ago. They told me I was no longer their daughter, that they never wanted to see me again. They can't just decide they want custody of Poppy now. Can't they? Victoria's voice was ice cold. We were distraught by our daughter's poor decisions, but we've had time to reconsider. Blood is blood, after all. Poppy is a Hartwell regardless of her irregular circumstances. She's not a Hartwell. She's a Reeves. She's my daughter. A daughter you can't properly provide for, Edmund said quietly. We can give Poppy everything, the best schools, proper social connections, a real future. What can you give her? A life of poverty and instability. Ivy looked at her parents, these people who had raised her to believe love was conditional, success was measured in dollar signs, and family was about bloodlines rather than bonds. She thought about Poppy's laughter when Dante held her, Tyler's fierce protectiveness, the way Mrs. Chen always made sure there were extra snacks in the pantry. I can give her a family that actually loves her, Ivy said quietly. I can give her people who will choose her every day, not just when it's convenient or profitable. Love doesn't pay for college tuition, Victoria replied, or provide proper health care, or ensure social advancement. Ask me if I care about social advancement. You should care. For Poppy's sake. Judge Morrison held up a hand. I think we need a brief recess to review the evidence and consider all parties' arguments. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. As the courtroom emptied, Ivy found herself sitting alone in the hallway, Poppy still babbling happily in her arms, completely unaware that her entire world was hanging in the balance. Dante appeared beside her like a shadow, his eyes back to their normal gray, but his whole body radiating tension. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For almost losing control in there. For making this harder for you. Ivy looked at him, this powerful, dangerous man who had risked his own exposure to protect her daughter, and felt her heart crack open. You didn't make anything harder. You saved us. That DNA test should have been done weeks ago. I should have protected you better. You can't protect me from everything, Dante. And you shouldn't have to. Yes, I should. His voice was fierce, desperate. Because I. He stopped abruptly, but Ivy could see the words he wasn't saying in his face. Because you what? Dante looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had turned his ordered life upside down, who argued with him about dishwashers and trusted him with her daughter, and treated him like he was just a man instead of a monster. Because I love you, he said simply. Not because you're Omega, not because you need protection, not because of some misguided alpha instinct. I love you because you're brave and fierce and you make terrible jokes when you're nervous. I love you because you see the best in everyone, even in Tyler when he's trying to blow up the kitchen. I love you because when you look at me, you don't see a weapon or a business asset or something to be afraid of. You see a man who stress eats quinoa chips and has strong opinions about proper dishwasher loading techniques. Ivy stared at him, her heart doing gymnastics in her chest. Dante, I know this isn't the time or place. I know you have more important things to worry about. But I needed you to know in case. In case I lose her? You won't lose her. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. Before Ivy could respond, Tyler appeared at her elbow, looking grim. We have a problem, he said quietly. What now? I've been doing research on Judge Morrison. She's good, fair, thorough, really cares about kids. But she's also conservative. Traditional family values, believes in the importance of financial stability, the whole thing. Ivy's heart sank. So my parents' money will definitely factor into her decision. Unless what? Tyler's grin was sharp and calculating. Unless we can prove that your parents aren't the upstanding citizens they appear to be. And lucky for us, rich people always have skeletons in their closets. It's just a matter of knowing where to dig. Tyler, what are you planning? Nothing illegal, Tyler said innocently. Just some very thorough internet research. The kind that might reveal interesting information about the Hartwell family's business practices. Or their charitable donations. Or their tax filings. You can't hack into. I'm not hacking anything. I'm just very good at finding publicly available information that other people don't know is publicly available. Dante's mouth quirked upward. How long do you need? Give me 20 minutes and a decent internet connection. Do it. As Tyler scurried away with his laptop, Ivy turned back to Dante. He's going to get in trouble. He's going to save your daughter. And what if he doesn't? What if the judge decides my parents are right, that money and stability matter more than love? Dante took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. Then we'll figure out another way. We'll appeal, we'll fight, we'll do whatever it takes. You're not alone in this, Ivy. You're pack. That means we don't give up, and we don't leave anyone behind. Ivy looked at him. This man who had just confessed his love in a courthouse hallway while her life fell apart around them, and felt something shift inside her chest. I love you too, she said quietly. Dante's eyes widened. You don't have to. I'm not saying it because you did. I'm saying it because it's true. I love that you hold Poppy like she's made of precious metal. I love that you let Tyler turn your kitchen into a science experiment. I love that you stress-eat junk food as a wolf and think proper dishwasher loading is a matter of moral principle. Ivy, I love that you see me as more than just another broken Omega who needs fixing. I love that you make me feel strong instead of small. She squeezed his hand. And I love that you're willing to risk everything to protect us, even when I'm too stubborn and scared to ask for help. Dante leaned down and kissed her forehead, soft and gentle and full of promise. We're going to get through this, he said against her skin. Together? Always together. The bailiff appeared in the hallway. Courts reconvening. All parties back to courtroom 3B. As they walked back into the courtroom, Ivy caught sight of Tyler in the gallery, his laptop open and his expression triumphant. He caught her eye and gave her a thumbs up that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. Whatever he'd found, it was about to change everything. Judge Morrison took her seat and looked around the courtroom with the expression of someone who'd seen far too much family drama for one day. After careful review of the evidence, she began, "I have several concerns about this case." Ivy held her breath, Poppy babbled happily in her arms, and Dante's hand found hers under the table, strong and steady and absolutely certain that whatever came next, they would face it together. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.